Welcome, Marvels, to the show. How are you? Hey, Dana, we've got a hot topic today.
Or cold, or room temperature,
or delicious,
or freeze dried, or Can you guess?
Freeze dried. I know.
By
Hey, Dana, we want to talk about food.
Yeah.
Right. Let's talk about food. I bump into food quite a bit because I'm working with and supporting, teens and young adults who are still living in their family homes.
Yeah.
So there is this well-intentioned, it is well-intentioned, desire, push, and dare I even say anxiety about eating a diet that is healthy.
Yeah.
I get it.
Despite the sensory nightmarishness of any given food, right?
I get it. I mean, I get it in my head. I get it even in my heart as a mom. I get it. But man, Dana, I'm seeing like a lot of kind of, dare I say, trauma.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
With food forcing.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So if you're talking about kids that are, well, maybe kids that are developing, kids that are growing, obviously need balanced diets. I mean, if you have a kid that's only eating a single food, they're going to develop nutritional deficiencies, right? But I think even medical doctors now, there's so many different ways to get nutrients into kids that aren't sensory problematic. Like we didn't have Ensure and like balanced protein bars and things like this when I was a kid, right? If you didn't eat it, and you're not going to get all the nutrients you need from like a vitamin. It just isn't possible. But ways to cook things and ways to get other nutrients into, like especially kids that are developing, there are ways to do that, right? But that food forcing thing, it's interesting. So there's a generational thing about this. I thank God that my parents, neither of them were the "you have to sit here until you finish this" types. Probably because my mom had her own aversions and would never do it to us. But like older folks going through the Depression, food was rare. You actually did go hungry a lot of times. It's like, you have to sit here and eat this till it's done. But my mom would let me do things like if she was making spaghetti for the rest of the family. And at the time, as a kid, I didn't like the meat sauce. Now I'm like, marinara sauce, awesome, but didn't like it then. So when the family ate spaghetti, I'd have buttered noodles, right? Not necessarily even having to make something different. I have adult clients that'll tell me things like good stories about it, which was, we always had X, Y, and Z in the house so that if we were eating as a family something that I didn't like, this was an easy alternative, and maybe even something that didn't have to be cooked or that was pre-cooked that you could just heat up or something like that. And to me, it's just as much of an accommodation for sensory issues as you'd give if you had a diabetic kid, right? You wouldn't feed a diabetic kid candy all day. I mean, you wouldn't feed a kid candy all day, but there would be compelling reasons why you wouldn't do that. Or foods that are high in sugar or fruits and things like that. So why is that an issue when it's just a sensory thing? People have to realize that the sensory issues around that aren't just like personal preference. It's visceral. I've heard stories, and you probably have too, where kids get forced to eat something and then they vomit because they can't even stand
There's
it.
A gag reflex.
The gag reflex happens.
Yeah.
And then it goes into this gaslighting around, it's psychological. And well, you're going to make it psychological by forcing them to do that. But the other side of that is working with that child or even an adult to psychoeducate them and have them involved in it, have them involved in their own food prep, give them agency to pick alternatives that can certainly be complete and balanced also, right? And talk to them and learn about those sensory issues. There's always the ones that all of us seem to have, like something that's that's chunky inside something that's slimy is like the worst thing ever. I bit into one of my go-to nutrition bars the other day, and I'm like, "What is in there?" It turned out there was like this piece of cardboard that was in there. It
Oh,
had somehow gotten in the production process. Had that been something like a food I was averse to, that would have been it for the rest of my life. I never would have eaten it. I just pulled the cardboard out and ate the rest of the bar. So there is a psychological component to it, like the safe foods, right? But something that I've talked to my doctor about, because I do have what I would call a fairly restricted diet. But the foods that I do eat as a whole are balanced, and I get it that way. And yes, I do take multivitamins, but I do eat a lot of, especially since I went meatless and became vegetarian, I eat a lot of protein bars that are plant based, and I can get protein in different ways. I do like eating a lot of whole vegetables, some cooked, but eat a lot of whole foods and things like that. But that's been something that I've worked with and been mindful of, and learned a lot about nutrition to make sure I would do that. So make sure that my
mm-hmm,
diet is varied enough that I'm getting that.
mm-hmm.
Or if I'm starting to feel, wrung out or tired or whatever, is there something I haven't had, and am I lacking something? So it's labor intensive, and I get it with parents, right? You don't always have time for that, but it's less labor intensive if you pre-plan those things, and if you know something isn't going to be okay for somebody, just have those go-tos, right? I have these. I make them homemade. It's a perfected recipe. I can't eat gluten either. I'm gluten sensitive, but they're these gluten-free oat bran muffins that I make that have a lot of protein in them. And I make them and I can freeze them. So if there's ever a time where I need something just to grab and go, I can take those with. When we go on trips, we're going to go to a conference this August. I'll have 4 days worth of those in my suitcase, on the off chance that where we go, I can't get gluten-free food or can't get food that it works for me. And of course, tons of those nutrition bars. But there's so many options now for different things like that. Yeah, I think parents just get afraid their kid's gonna never want to eat anything out in a restaurant or in front of other people or something like that. The other thing, I was much more food restricted when I was younger, although I didn't love my mom's cooking. Everything she made, I just loved, so I ate. That was no problem. But I went those years that all kids go through, like all I would eat was hot dogs, and now I'm like, I would never touch a hot dog if you paid me, because I've learned what's in it. But those same sort of foods. And then, interestingly, when I was in my early 20s, I started just deliberately branching out a little bit. And I'm like, oh, I actually like these. These are good. These vegetables are actually good. But I didn't, aside from like iceberg lettuce and maybe cucumbers, that was the only vegetable I wanted to have anything to do with as a little kid. And now I like all of them. So
Yeah.
there's also time to change too.
Yeah. Yeah. This kind of workaround, right? Like,
Mhm.
I think what I find is that parents get very anxious about it being a slippery slope. And it's
Yeah.
like, wow, if I just give in, and I'm putting air quotes up, if I
Mhm.
like just give in to this preference, which by the way, I think calling it a preference is even not enough. Like,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
actually like, I can't tolerate that texture. It makes me
Yeah.
gag. It makes me throw up. And that's not being dramatic.
Right.
It's that I really like it. This doesn't work well for me. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's like, how do we discover our workarounds? I mean, even if a multivitamin doesn't, and there are a lot of like green powders, and like there's a lot of stuff out there today
Yeah.
that can cover this. But
Exactly.
whether you put it in a smoothie, or you put, it's in the form of a gummy,
Yeah.
you know, um, that at least is some insurance policy
Right. Right.
so that you can do that. I will say the limited nature or the limited repertoire of foods, in many, many ways, is really when I'm working with an adult and we're trying to figure out, how do we help you have more agency in your life? How do we prepare you to
Mhm.
be on your own? How do you experience more independence? one of the first questions I ask is,
Mm,
what do they eat? And
yeah.
because when it's a restricted thing and they can eat the same thing every day, all day, it makes things so much easier in
Yeah.
regards to like, look, they don't have to learn how to make 5 million different things. We need
Right.
to teach them how to make these 5 things that they can do at home.
Yeah.
And it's the same process every day. That's when you see really beautiful independence, actually. Because now
Oh,
I can feed
nice.
myself lunch, dinner, and breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's the same thing. It makes grocery shopping really easy. It actually makes budgeting really easy. It makes prep really easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm always like, look, we can always backfill it with a vitamin. I mean,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like there you can do that, or
Yeah.
whatever, a bar. A lot of my clients like bars too.
Uh-huh.
A bar. You can do that. So, but let's not do I mean, we're doing these crazy food battles where it's
Yeah.
like you cannot eat what you want to eat until you eat this mango, this apple, this celery, this spinach, this whatever. You have to have one bite of it before, and it's just I'm watching
You're teaching
this.
someone to betray their body. You're
Yeah.
teaching them to not listen to internal cues because it's not always just the texture and the taste. It can be, does it get you
The
bloated? Does it tend to, you feel it after you eat it? And it can be all those other kinds of things too. A lot of autistic
yeah.
people have gastroparesis, so their stomach empties slower. So they'll get gas built up and all. Yeah, you're actually teaching someone, don't listen to your internal cues and eat this no matter what. And then you're basically training someone to be numb about food, which is not good. That's a terrible lesson to teach a person.
Yeah. I
Right?
mean, yeah. And like Dana, what happens, because I can hear some of these parents going, so
Mm,
if all they're eating is chicken nuggets, bananas, and toast, which
mhm.
by the way
Chicken
is
nuggets are repulsive, but I get it. I know people like those. Yeah.
oh my gosh. Those dino nuggets from Costco, you know, some of my clients wouldn't be in existence if those weren't on the market.
There is protein
Um,
in there amongst other things, but
Oh
they are, yeah,
man.
yeah.
But we get it. I mean, this is not for us, this is not judgment. This is
Right.
how do we acknowledge where someone is,
Yeah.
why they're having these reactions,
Mhm.
and then how can we kind of address what we're worried about in a way
Mhm.
that's more collaborative,
Yeah.
cooperative,
Yes.
um and let go of some of that anyway. Because I'm just going to say, forcing someone to eat, let's say, greens before they eat anything else, I
Oh,
find like that actually leads to them not wanting to eat at all.
yeah. That's a problem. Yeah.
So it's just really interesting. Like there's a lot of weird things with food.
The thing that's interesting about
Um,
that too is that things like things like vitamins and minerals that you're getting in things like greens, those are actually the ones that you can easily get through vitamins.
mhm,
Right? It's more
mhm,
complex things like proteins and,
mhm,
other things that, have to go into maintaining skin and ligaments and tendons, those kinds of things. Those are actually harder to get in. You can't get those through vitamins. So eating something like the Dino Nuggets are actually gonna have that in there. So you are getting them in that way. And
yeah.
yeah, collaborative, and then train yourself about nutrition, not in a way that like you become this expert that you're obsessed with making sure your kid gets every little
Mm.
thing, but that you can relax a little bit around what you can agree on together.
I do like that, Dina, this idea of what am I worried about?
Mhm.
And how does the body and how can the body access this? What does it
Mhm.
do for the body?
Mhm.
How do we access this?
Mhm.
Um, but you're right. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think there's this kind of huge market of green powders right now.
Yeah.
And vitamins. There's a lot out there. It's like $1 billion industry
Oh, yeah.
actually. This
Yeah. Yeah.
so there's a lot of really great things out there, and whether that gets snuck into like, smoothies or something.
Yeah.
But a
Yeah.
vitamin at minimum,
Yeah.
I think can handle some of the things that people are really worried about.
Yeah.
Um, most of
And
my
what
clients
I
don't have trouble with protein.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. But what I tell people too, and maybe it's having the vet tech background is helpful for this, so many foods are enriched anyway. And if you're making sure you don't have any deficiencies, you're talking to your doctor, you're doing blood tests, and nothing's missing. I'll ask them, have you ever had a pet? Have you ever had a dog or a cat? And they'll say, oh, yes, of course I have. And I said, well, what did you feed it? The cats are easier because, like, cat food. Dogs kind of get scrapped from the table. So, did that cat live a long and healthy life? Yeah. Do you know why? Because everything they need is in that one food. It's one food. Same with dogs. Those, well, except for the ones like that are out of the market now that aren't complete and balanced, you shouldn't feed your animals. Totally another topic. But things like Purina and the foods that have been around forever, your dog can survive and have a healthy life on that because everything is in those little kibbles. They've researched it. They know what a dog's nutrition needs to be. And if you never fed them a scrap from the table, they can live and live well on that one food. That's the analogy here, right? If you find something that together will work for your kid and you're upset because they're not eating a salad, but they're getting everything they need and that other thing, what difference does it make?
Yeah.
It's the same thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe the idea here is like educate yourself and choose your battles.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and the other thing is you don't want to drive them towards ARFID, which is a avoidant food restrictive intake disorder, which is I've learned a lot about this because I have a student who defended her dissertation on this. Isn't anorexia, isn't bulimia, isn't it? It's considered a eating disorder, but it's very specific. And we see a lot of this in autistic people and neurodiverse people, and it's out of sensory issues. I mean, so you can push this into developing a disorder and they're going to avoid everything then, right? Versus
that's actually what I see.
Yes.
That's more of what I see. I see like you're not gonna get what you want. You're not gonna get your chicken nuggets until you eat X, and then it just leads to I don't want to eat anything.
I'm not gonna.
It's actually what I'm seeing. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the longer you go with not hardly eating anything, the more your body's gonna have a reaction to it when you do introduce something back that was a safe food. So keep that repertoire as much as you can and don't drive it into that. That becomes problematic. And then that's an issue, right? Because it's all about sensory stuff then after that. And it's harder to reintroduce a food than it is to force someone to not eat it in the first place.
Yeah. Yep. All right, Dina. Well, this one was, it's like a little appetizer of an episode.
Oh, there you go. Short and sweet. We could do this all day.
Or maybe it's dessert.
Hope this doesn't leave a bitter taste in your mouth. Yeah.
Well, maybe it wants you coming back for more. Oh, okay. Sorry.
That's
okay,
awesome.
we're dorky. I love it. All right, Marvels. We will see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye, everybody.